They don't want you to think clearly, because if you did, even for just 10 seconds, you'd stop doing half the things that make you controllable. You wouldn't say yes out of fear. You wouldn't stay silent just to be polite. You wouldn't chase goals that were never really yours. And you wouldn't crave approval from people who secretly hope to see you fail. More than anything, you wouldn't make decisions that betray your own advantage. That's why most people are trained to confuse movement with meaning and emotion with truth. But Machiavelli didn't live in that confusion. He operated with clarity, ruthless clarity. And if you learn to think like he did, your decisions will sharpen, your mistakes will shrink, and every avoided error will multiply your power. Here's the truth. The problem isn't that people don't think, it's that they think in the wrong order. Most start with emotion, then scramble to justify it logically afterward. They feel insulted, then invent reasons to retaliate. They feel anxious, then convince themselves there's a threat. They feel attracted, then build virtues to rationalize it. Emotion first, logic second. Which means if the emotion is miscalibrated, the logic is already doomed. Machiavelli flipped that entire equation. He didn't begin with emotion, he began with outcome. What do I want? What must I protect? What must I avoid? Only then did he let emotions enter the conversation, but by that point they weren't steering. They were leashed. This brings us to the first principle of clear thinking. Separate the useful from the truthful. Not everything true is useful, and not everything useful is entirely true. Decisions aren't about reality, they're about outcomes. That's why Machiavelli said it was more important to appear virtuous than to actually be virtuous. Not because he loved deception, but because he knew perception shapes reaction. And in the game of power, people don't respond to truth, they respond to belief. So if you want to think clearly, stop demanding certainty. Start demanding clarity of consequence. Ask yourself, if I believe this, where does it lead? That one shift is enough to make bad ideas collapse under their own weight. Clear thinking is not about knowing everything, it's about knowing what to ignore. Most people drown in noise. Every headline, every opinion, every stray comment from a stranger online becomes fuel for reaction. They mistake information overload for intelligence when in reality it's paralysis. Machiavelli understood that focus is rarer than talent. He didn't waste time on abstractions that didn't change outcomes. He didn't obsess over fairness in a world that was already unfair. He didn't clutter his mind with questions of morality when the real question was survival. His clarity came from subtraction, from stripping away what didn't matter until only leverage remained. And this is where most people betray themselves. They try to think about everything at once. They juggle loyalty, morality, ego, fear, and desire, then wonder why their decisions collapse under contradiction. Clear thinking begins when you decide what is irrelevant. Not later, not after analysis first. Ask yourself, does this matter to my outcome? If the answer is no, discard it. Don't moralize about it. Don't spiral about it. Drop it. Because every ounce of attention spent on the irrelevant is stolen from the essential. History is full of leaders undone not by enemies, but by distraction. They chased glory when they should have chased stability. They sought revenge when patience would have destroyed their rivals more completely. They obsessed over appearances in moments where results mattered more. Each error came from noise, listening to what didn't matter. Clarity, then, is ruthless. It's not about fairness. It's about hierarchy of importance. You train yourself to notice the signal hiding beneath the chaos. Who has real power here? What incentives actually drive them? What outcome matters most? Everything else, every rumor, every emotion, every passing thought is a trap. So the second principle of clear thinking is this: reduce. Cut the noise. Ignore the irrelevant. Protect your attention like a fortress. Because in a world where everyone is reacting to everything, the one who ignores most things sees most clearly. The third principle of clear thinking is inversion. Flipping the problem upside down. Most people ask, how do I win? Machiavelli asked, how do I avoid losing? The difference sounds small, but it changes everything. When you chase victory, you get reckless. You start chasing applause, speed, and visibility. You gamble because you're intoxicated by the dream of gain. But when you think in terms of avoiding loss, your vision sharpens. You see risks others ignore. You see traps forming long before they're sprung. You stop bleeding energy on battles that don't matter. Machiavelli's world was full of rulers who destroyed themselves by reaching too far too fast. Kings who wanted more land but drained their treasury. Generals who sought glory but marched into ambushes. Princes who tried to win love but lost fear and with it control. They all asked, how do I win more? They should have asked, what will destroy me if I'm careless? Inversion doesn't mean cowardice. It means building from survival outward. First, you protect your foundation, your reputation, your alliances, your resources. Then you expand. This way, every gain is built on a base that won't collapse at the first sign of resistance. You win not by gambling everything, but by never letting a single mistake wipe you out. Modern life is the same. People ruin their health chasing wealth. They ruin their peace chasing recognition. They ruin their relationships chasing validation. In every case, they asked the wrong question. They chased more instead of preventing collapse. Here's the discipline before every decision. Ask not only, what can I gain, but what must I avoid? A single mistake can cost more than 10 smart moves can earn back. Machiavelli's genius was that he survived. And survival stretched long enough becomes dominance. So the third principle is this: stop obsessing over the best outcome. Start obsessing over the worst. Because if you avoid ruin, success has time to accumulate. And the man who avoids destruction long enough doesn't just play the game, he eventually owns it. The fourth principle of clear thinking is detachment. Most people can't separate themselves from the moment they get swept away by pride, when praised by anger, when insulted by panic, when threatened. In that state, they don't make choices. Choices are made for them by their emotions, by their enemies, by the situation itself. Machiavelli saw this weakness everywhere. Princes who reacted too quickly to flattery ended up manipulated by courtiers. Leaders who lashed out at insults turned temporary annoyances into lifelong feuds. Generals who panicked in retreat lost not because of strategy, but because their soldiers saw fear in their eyes. Emotion trapped them in the present moment, and the present moment betrayed them. Detachment means stepping outside the frame, looking at the board as if you were not on it, asking yourself, if this weren't happening to me, how would I see it? That single shift creates distance between you and the chaos. Suddenly, an insult becomes information about your rival's insecurity. A setback becomes a test of patience. A temptation becomes a mirror of your own weakness. You see the structure, not just the sting. Detachment doesn't mean coldness. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't react. You choose your response after you've seen the bigger picture. That pause, the gap between stimulus and response, is where clarity lives. And clarity is what makes your actions unpredictable, deliberate, and effective. History remembers leaders who mastered this. Marcus Aurelius, who faced betrayal and loss, yet remained calm enough to write philosophy in the middle of crisis. Machiavelli himself, who even in exile and disgrace, studied the patterns of power rather than drowning in bitterness. Their detachment didn't erase emotion, it turned emotion into signal instead of sabotage. So the fourth principle is this: don't get trapped inside the moment. Step outside it. Watch yourself as you would a rival. Act only after the storm has passed inside you. Because the man who cannot detach is a puppet, and the man who can detach pulls the strings. The fifth principle of clear thinking is leverage perception. Most people obsess over what's true. Machiavelli obsessed over what's believed. Because in power, it doesn't matter if something is real, it matters if people act as if it is. Think of reputation. You don't need to be the strongest warrior if everyone believes you're ruthless. They'll hesitate before fighting, and hesitation itself becomes your weapon. You don't need to be endlessly generous if people believe you reward loyalty. The belief makes them loyal before you even act. In politics, in business, and life, perception is the currency that spends itself. Machiavelli's brilliance was separating personal virtue from public image. He advised rulers to appear merciful, faithful, humane, but to act against those virtues whenever survival required it. Was that hypocrisy? Perhaps. But it was also survival. Because people don't reward truth, they reward appearances that comfort or terrify them. The mistake most people make is chasing sincerity. They reveal too much thinking honesty earns respect. Sometimes it does, but often it hands your enemies the map to your weaknesses. Others try to correct every false rumor, every misinterpretation, every insult. They waste energy fighting shadows when they could have been shaping light. Clear thinking says you don't control what people believe entirely, but you can tilt it. You can feed silence, let mystery grow, or drop fragments that suggest more than they reveal. You can use scarcity speak rarely, and every word weighs more. Or use contrast, sometimes soft, sometimes hard, so no one can predict which face they'll meet. Over time, the fragments assemble into a picture larger than reality. History proves it. Leaders remembered as merciful were often ruthless. Leaders remembered as unbreakable often hid their fears in silence. Leaders remembered as wise sometimes made foolish choices, but their perception outlived their mistakes. So the fifth principle is this: stop arguing about what's true. Start guiding what's believed. Because truth is fragile, but perception is contagious. And in the game of power, perception always outruns reality. The sixth principle of clear thinking is neutrality as a weapon. Most people rush to take sides. They crave belonging, so they declare loyalty quickly. They crave approval, so they echo the loudest voice in the room. But every declared side is also a declared limit. Once you're tied to one faction, you inherit their enemies, their failures, their blind spots. Machiavelli understood the value of appearing neutral, not because he believed in fairness, but because neutrality keeps doors open. When two rivals fight, both may still trust you. When factions split, both may still confide in you. When the balance shifts, you can lean where advantage is greatest without being branded a traitor. Silence and ambiguity are not weakness. They are shields. Neutrality also amplifies your influence. In chaos, everyone is desperate for an anchor, someone, steady someone, who doesn't get dragged into emotional tides. If you hold your ground while others scramble, they will project strength onto you. They will seek your opinion, your reassurance, your presence. Without declaring yourself, you become the center of gravity. But neutrality doesn't mean passivity. You aren't a ghost, you're a mirror. You reflect back what others reveal. You listen more than you speak. You study where each side is blind, where their emotions betray them, where their ambition leads them into traps. And when the moment comes, you tip the balance with one move appearing as the solution both sides needed. History is full of this strategy. Advisors who counseled both kings and their rivals and survived whichever side won. Merchants who armed both armies, profiting no matter who claimed victory. Leaders who appeared impartial until the exact moment they declared, and by then the outcome was already sealed. So the sixth principle is this: don't rush to plant your flag. Let others exhaust themselves in battles of pride and noise. Stand still long enough and the fight will circle around you. Because in the end, neutrality isn't absence, it's hidden leverage. The seventh principle of clear thinking is to separate signal from flattery. Most people are addicted to praise. They inhale compliments as proof of their worth. But flattery is rarely truth. It's currency. People pay it to gain influence, to soften you, to lower your guard. If you mistake flattery for signal, you'll be manipulated before you realize you've been bought. Machiavelli warned rulers of this trap constantly. He wrote that a prince should never surround himself only with yes men, because they will lead him into ruin. Flatterers tell you what you want to hear, not what you need to know. They protect their position by feeding your ego while quietly steering you toward their own advantage. Clear thinking demands a different approach. Treat every compliment like a transaction. Ask yourself, what does this person gain by saying this? If there's an incentive, assume it's strategy, not sincerity. And if you hear the same flattery from multiple mouths, it's no longer opinion, it's coordination. That's when the danger is highest, because coordinated flattery is often the prelude to betrayal. But rejection of flattery doesn't mean rejection of feedback. You must still notice the signal hidden inside the noise. If enemies insult you, that may reveal where they feel weak. If allies offer cautious criticism, that may reveal blind spots. The challenge is filtering, separating what feeds your ego from what sharpens your vision. The solution: builds spaces where honesty costs less than lies. Reward the rare truth tellers who speak what you don't want to hear. Punish the flatterers only when their deceit endangers you, but never let them believe you're blind to their game. Once they know you can see through it, their flattery becomes information, not manipulation. So the seventh principle is this: don't be intoxicated by praise. Praise inflates and inflation blinds. Instead, measure every word as strategy. Flattery hides intent, while criticism often hides truth. Learn to separate them, and you'll see the battlefield more clearly than the men fighting on it. The eighth principle of clear thinking is patience with outcomes. Most people sabotage themselves because they demand results too quickly. If a move doesn't pay off immediately, they abandon it. If a rival doesn't collapse at once, they grow anxious. But the game of power is not a sprint, it's a long siege. Machiavelli understood that the strongest strategy often takes time to reveal its edge. Clear thinking means you don't measure decisions only by the next hour or even the next week. You measure them by durability. Ask yourself, will this choice still protect me a year from now? Will it still strengthen me 5 years from now? That shift in perspective eliminates most reckless moves instantly. Patience is also a weapon. When others expect you to react, your delay unsettles them. Silence after provocation makes your rivals overextend. Calm waiting after betrayal makes traitors nervous because they know punishment is coming, they just don't know when. The uncertainty is often more destructive than the blow itself. History is full of examples. Generals who refused to be lured into premature battles while enemies exhausted themselves. Rulers who allowed rivals to grow overconfident only to strike once the trap was certain. Leaders who appeared inactive, but whose patience allowed opportunities to ripen until victory was inevitable. Their strength wasn't aggression, it was timing. But patience doesn't mean passivity. You are not sitting idle, you are watching, preparing, shaping the field quietly until the moment is right. Every delay is a calculation. Every pause is pressure. Every silence is a test of who grows restless first. So the eighth principle is this: trust time more than impulse. Let others waste their energy demanding immediate wins. You build moves that last, strategies that endure. Because in the end, the patient player isn't the one who waits, he's the one who chooses when the waiting ends. The ninth principle of clear thinking is to study motives, not words. Most people take language at face value. They believe promises, threats, apologies, declarations. But words are cheap. Machiavelli knew that men speak what is safe, not what is real. If you want clarity, ignore what is said and look at what is sought. Every action, no matter how disguised, comes from motive. The merchant flatters you because he wants your gold. The ally warns you of betrayal because he wants to secure his own position. The rival insults you publicly because he wants to provoke a reaction. If you fixate on the surface, the words, you'll be misled. If you trace the incentive beneath them, the pattern becomes obvious. This is why Machiavelli insisted rulers should judge men not by their declarations, but by their necessities. People may lie about their loyalty, but hunger never lies. Fear never lies. Ambition never lies. When you strip away the story, what remains is always a motive tied to gain security or pride. Clear thinking then requires listening differently. Don't ask, what are they saying? Ask, why are they saying it now? What do they stand to gain? What do they fear losing? This shift turns manipulation into revelation. Their words become signals, not truths. History proves it. Kings destroyed themselves by trusting flatterers who swore loyalty. Generals walked into traps because they believed false reports instead of questioning who benefited from the misinformation. Leaders were undone because they focused on speeches instead of incentives. All of them forgot the rule: men lie, but motives don't. So the ninth principle is this: never be blinded by language. Strip away the noise until only need remains. Because when you understand what people truly want, their choices stop being mysterious and start being predictable. The 10th principle of clear thinking is to master framing. Most people walk into situations accepting the frame handed to them. They answer questions instead of questioning why those questions exist. They defend themselves instead of deciding whether the accusation deserves attention. In doing so, they lose the most important power, the power to define the game itself. Machiavelli understood that whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. If a ruler lets his enemies define him as weak, then every act of strength looks like desperation. If he defines himself as steady and inevitable, then even his silences look deliberate. Framing decides whether you're seen as a victim or a strategist, as merciful or ruthless, as reactive or commanding. Clear thinking demands that you stop accepting the assumptions of others. If someone asks, "Are you strong enough to face this rival?" the better response is not yes or no. The better response is to reframe, "This rival isn't even worthy of comparison." Suddenly, the question itself collapses. You've shifted the conversation from their ground to yours. This principle applies everywhere. In politics, framing an invasion as liberation turns aggression into virtue. In business calling, a failure, a pivot, turns loss into progress. In personal life, presenting distance as focus transforms suspicion into respect. The facts don't change, but the meaning does. And people live in meaning more than facts. But framing is not about lying. It's about directing attention. You highlight one piece of the puzzle while leaving others in shadow. You decide which details matter and which can be ignored. You tell the story before someone else tells it for you. So the 10th principle is this: never play inside someone else's frame. Break it, rebuild it, and make them step into yours. Because the one who defines the frame doesn't just win the argument, he wins the entire game. The 11th principle of clear thinking is to measure cost, not intent. Most people judge actions by whether they seem good or bad kind, or cruel, generous, or selfish. But Machiavelli stripped away moral illusions. He looked at consequences, not intentions. Because in power, what matters is not what someone meant, it's what their action costs you. An ally may betray you by accident, a rival may harm you without malice, a subordinate may weaken you with good intentions. None of that matters, the damage is the same. Clear thinking refuses to be lulled by apologies or excuses. It weighs the outcome, not the story. This doesn't mean you dismiss intent entirely. Understanding it helps predict future behavior. But when deciding how to respond, outcome rules. If a friend's mistake cost you a war, forgiveness doesn't erase the loss. If a rival's generosity strengthens your position, suspicion doesn't erase the gain. Clarity requires ruthless accounting. Add the benefits, subtract the harm, act on the balance. Machiavelli's world was full of princes destroyed by misplaced trust. They forgave loyalists who failed, excused allies who faltered, tolerated incompetence because it wasn't deliberate. Yet their kingdoms fell all the same. Meanwhile, the rulers who endured were those who measured cost. They rewarded what helped, punished what harmed, regardless of intent. Modern life is no different. Leaders cling to partners who drain them because their heart is in the right place. People excuse betrayals because they didn't mean it. These excuses blind them to the simple fact weakness tolerated long enough becomes fatal. So the 11th principle is this: detach from intent. Weigh only results. Let others argue about morality, you calculate cost. Because in the end, survival isn't built on stories. It's built on outcomes. The 12th principle of clear thinking is to exploit contradiction. Most people collapse when they face conflicting truths. They want the world to be simple: good versus evil, loyalty versus betrayal, friend versus enemy. But Machiavelli knew the world doesn't work like that. People are loyal and selfish, generous and cruel, brave in one moment, cowardly in the next. The strong mind doesn't reject contradiction, it uses it. Clear thinking means recognizing that people aren't consistent. They bend depending on incentives, fears, and opportunities. Instead of being shocked when a friend betrays or an enemy helps you see it as natural. Everyone carries contradictions. Once you accept this, you stop demanding purity and you start seeing leverage. For example, a rival who hates you may still need your approval to advance. An ally who supports you may secretly envy you, but can't afford to oppose you. Both emotions coexist. The contradiction makes them predictable because they are pulled in two directions. You don't erase the tension, you amplify it until they tear themselves apart trying to resolve it. Machiavelli advised rulers to play virtues against each other, to appear merciful while being ruthless when necessary, to inspire both fear and respect so subjects never fully relaxed. He turned contradiction into armor. By refusing to be only one thing, he became unreadable. By mastering both sides, he stayed untouchable. Most people feel guilt when they're inconsistent. Clear thinkers feel opportunity. Because the truth is, contradiction is everywhere in politics, in business, and love. The one who sees it and exploits it gains twice: once from the strength of one side, and again from the weakness of the other. So the 12th principle is this: don't demand coherence, demand advantage. See the contradictions people hide from themselves, and you'll understand them better than they understand themselves. See your own contradictions, and you'll master yourself before anyone else can. The 13th principle of clear thinking is endurance of uncertainty. Most people crave answers. They feel unsafe in ambiguity, so they rush to conclusions, even wrong ones, just to escape the discomfort of not knowing. But Machiavelli understood that uncertainty is not an enemy. It is the natural state of power, and the one who endures it the longest holds the advantage. Clear thinking means resisting the urge to close every gap too quickly. When you don't know someone's loyalty, you don't rush to label them friend or enemy, you watch. When you don't know the outcome of a conflict, you don't bet everything on hope, you prepare for both victory and defeat. When others panic for clarity, you stay still long enough for reality to reveal itself. This is difficult because the human mind hates the unknown. It prefers lies over silence, illusions over gaps. That's why people believe rumors, cling to appearances, and project certainty where none exists. But in doing so, they hand themselves over to manipulation. The rival who pretends confidence controls those who cannot sit with doubt. Machiavelli's rulers endured uncertainty by treating it as weapon. A prince who speaks rarely leaves others guessing. A general who delays creates fear in the enemy camp because soldiers imagine dangers greater than reality. A leader who withholds judgment forces his advisors to reveal more, hoping to sway him. In all cases, uncertainty wasn't weakness, it was leverage. History proves this again and again. The most feared figures weren't always the strongest. They were the most unreadable. Their enemies wasted energy trying to guess their next move while they simply waited for the right moment to strike. So the 13th principle is this: tolerate the fog. Let others choke on their need for clarity. Don't rush to define what time will reveal, because the man who endures uncertainty becomes the one who shapes it. The 14th principle of clear thinking is to weaponize absence. Most people believe power comes from constant visibility, always speaking, always posting, always being seen. But Machiavelli knew that overexposure breeds weakness. The more familiar you are, the more ordinary you appear. The more available you are, the less weight your presence carries. Clear thinking flips this. Instead of flooding the stage, you retreat strategically. You make yourself scarce. You let silence stretch longer than comfort. You let distance build tension. Because absence, when deliberate, creates gravity. People begin to feel your lack as presence. They replay your words, speculate on your motives, even invent meanings to fill the gap. Absence also sharpens contrast. If you are always kind, kindness becomes expected. If you are always cruel, cruelty loses its sting. But when you withdraw, your return magnifies whatever you choose to display. A rare smile becomes unforgettable. A sudden punishment terrifies more than years of threats. Your rhythm of vanishing and returning controls their emotions like tides. History offers endless proof. Emperors who appeared rarely were revered as near divine. Leaders who spoke sparingly made every word echo. Even in personal life, the figure who pulls away creates more obsession than the one who clings. What people can't have, they imagine endlessly. But absence must be intentional. Too much and you fade. Too little and you lose impact. The art is balance, enough distance to build hunger, enough return to feed it. The space you create is not emptiness, it's theater. And in that theater, others project their own fears and desires onto you. So the 14th principle is this: stop thinking presence is power. Presence is cheap. Absence is expensive. Withdraw with intent, and you'll discover that sometimes the most commanding voice in the room is the one that isn't speaking at all. The 15th and final principle of clear thinking is sovereignty of mind. Every rule before this detachment, inversion, patience, absence, was about strategy in the outer world. But the true fortress is inside. If your mind isn't sovereign, no amount of tactics will save you. You'll still be ruled by fear, by desire, by envy, by the opinions of others. Machiavelli knew that the greatest chains are invisible. They aren't armies or laws. They're the beliefs you've absorbed without question, the fear of being disliked, the hunger for validation, the impulse to react when provoked. These chains pull most people like puppets, and they never realize it. Clear thinking demands you cut those strings. You stop asking, "What will they think?" and start asking, "What will this achieve?" You stop craving fairness in a world that has never been fair. You stop needing approval in a world where approval is currency, not truth. You think not as a servant of emotion, but as the architect of outcome. Sovereignty doesn't mean isolation. You still play the game. You still deal with allies, rivals, and crowds. But you never let their noise drown your clarity. Their moods may shift. Their loyalty may fade. Their words may twist. But your focus remains unmoved. That stillness, that refusal to let the outside dictate the inside, is sovereignty. History's enduring figures all shared this. They weren't the loudest or even the most loved. They were the ones who remained unshaken while others wavered. Their calm became terrifying. Their silence became command. Their clarity became inevitability. So the 15th principle is this: rule yourself before you rule anything else. Master your mind, or the world will master it for you. Because in the end, the strongest fortress is not built of walls, wealth, or armies. It is built of a sovereign mind, clear, disciplined, untouchable. And once you own that, no one can ever truly own you.